Hello. As of the time of this going up, Enemy North is officially 6 weeks away. And I have a lot of costumes that I could wear. But what if I made an entirely new costume? That's right, I'm making Aura the Guillotine. Because I hate myself. Because I want to. Because it's pretty. Because why not? So I'm gonna do a piece a week basically. I'm gonna start with the corset, then I'm gonna do the 2 skirts, then I'm gonna do the boots, then the gloves, and the wig. I might do the boots and gloves in 1 week. We'll see, because I have to edit all these videos too. So I am starting with the corset, and that means I've got all my corset supplies. So let's go through them really fast. I've got this nice medium weight twill. I like to use a twill as my base, and this way I can do my mock-up in the twill, and then I don't have to do too much adjusting to it usually. I've made a lot of corset style tops. It's not a true corset. And this will also act as the lining for the corset. Basically, I'm going to make this corset out of this fabric completely and then just cover it with my fashion fabric, which is this really fun oil slick black stretch vinyl, also known as PVC. I've got this metallic stretch spandex. Now I'm using this because if I used a PVC, like another vinyl, the colors would bleed on each other. This won't bleed and it won't pick up the black either. For the actual structure of the corset, I've got zip ties, which I love for boning. They're cheap, they work really well, for me at least. I've got some cotton lacing, which I can always swap out for a shoelace. I've got grommets in like an almost black, it's like a gunmetal, close enough, it's in the back. I've got a bit of twill tape for the waist tape, importante. And then I've got a couple different like boob options for the boob cups. I don't want to have to try and do underwire, so I'm just going to cover one of these. I'll do like the underbust corset basically and see which one looks right with it, and then cover it and include it in the corset. I have more bras than this. I like to go to the secondhand store and just pick up a bunch of different ones in approximately my size, and then I have them if I need them. They were all like $3, if not less. So the first thing we're gonna do is start in on the pattern. Let's get to it. Then I realized that I needed to do a quick sketch to figure out the lines of the corset. What I ended up going for was kind of 3 panels in the front and 2 panels in the back. And then I like to do a V towards the tummy because I find it helps flatten my little tummy. And yeah, once I knew that, it was time to do the pattern. To do the actual pattern, I started by taking all of my measurements. Now for this I did an underbust measurement, a waist measurement, and a high hip measurement. My waist measurement was a reduced waist measurement. And then I also measured all my heights from my underbust to my waist, from my waist to my high hip, and drew it all out. I did end up measuring from my center front to the princess line along the underbust to figure out how wide that would be, and kind of eyeballed it down from there. You'll see that I also figured out what my front waist measurement was so I could do the 3 panels just kind of by eye so that they equaled that amount, and the same for the back panels. Making sure that the center back was straight flat, and I gave myself lots of extra material so that I could pin it closed. And then I just basted all of my seams together, starting at the center front and working out on both sides. Made sure that I notched all of my waist seams so I could make sure that waistline was tight all the way around. And then yeah, it was time to try it on with a bra piece. Oh, so sexy. So I can kind of pull it taut and see that it would work with the boning. I like to leave it a little looser on the bottom. I need to pin that. I'll pin that so that I'm a little sway backed. It happens. And then I did end up having to cut this line down lower to fit with the bra that I chose and take this in as well. So we're going to make all these marks. And then I'm going to draft the cup that goes on top, and then we will cut it out of the fashion fabric. And it does So first things first, I took everything apart and made all my adjustments to the pattern, making sure to take up that back piece and then recut it because it did have like a dart in it basically, and I don't want that on the finished item. I then took my cups and drafted the cups on top, and I did this by just spreading the fabric over top and pinching the excess so that it was a smooth curve. Then I cut out a second set out of my twill so that I'd have two to sandwich together to hold all my boning and everything, and then I cut it out of the fashion fabric, which is that oil slick PVC. Then I sewed everything together, starting with the cups. I did put the cups off to the side because I wanted to attach them after everything else. And then I just did panel by panel, all three of them. So I started with the center front and did my two sides beside that on all three sets. Then I did the next panel on all three sets, and so on and so forth until they were all done. Now, not pictured here is the ironing. I ironed all of my seams open flat. Then I put my two twill corsets together, wrong sides together, and sewed down all of the seam lines. And after I did the center seam, I remembered that I did actually have to put the waist tape in. So on either side, I just put one piece of waist tape and I just did it equidistant on either side of the waist notch all the way down. This stops it from stretching out on your waist and helps give that really snatched look. And then just to either side of each seam line to give myself a boning channel. I did do one down the center front as well, knowing that it would have the cutout in it and kind of mess it up, but that's fine. And some of them weren't extremely perfect, and that's okay with me. They still fit together correctly, and it fit on me correctly. I like to do 2 boning channels per seam just to give enough structure with the zip ties. Then it was time to attach the cups. So I made sure the placement was correct, and then I just quickly sewed on the ones I had cut out. Then I actually took time to hand sew the bra into the corset so it wouldn't shift on me. The next step was actually putting the holes and grommets in the back so I could lace it up properly and make sure that it fit. To do this, I had a little tool that I used. I marked out where the waist was and where the top and bottom were, and then I used the tool to make sure that they were equally apart. You can also use math. I do a fair amount of corsets, so I just do it that way. And I made sure it lined up between the two sides. My favorite tool for corseting is actually a drill press. I have the bit that you normally hammer in. If you put it in the drill press and are careful, you can just zip through all of them. It was great, so fast. 10 out of 10 would recommend. And then I just pressed in all of my grommets. I have the die for it that actually you use to just pop it in and go because I do a fair amount of these. Otherwise, you have to use the little tool and hammer it. And the last step before trying everything on is putting in boning. So I actually did trim the boning for the very end, and then after that I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get more than one channel per piece of boning, so I might as well just stick them all in, let them hang out the bottom, try it on so I can figure out what line I wanted for the bottom, like visually, and then I could go back and trim them all after. I didn't want to trim them all to this length and then find out that they actually had to be shorter. It's just extra work. So I would say it fits pretty well. I'm standing off to the side so I can look at myself in the mirror. The back's as low as I would like it to go. The lacing is equal. It can go a little tighter on the top, but it's hard to tighten on myself. But yeah, pretty happy. Let's see. If we have that as the point here, so that I can actually sit. And then, there we go, into the 0 there. because the skirt's gonna sit up here. Really accentuate the waist as much as we can. Oh, it could come up. No, I'm gonna leave it like that. Okay, and then her center is over her belly button, so my belly button is here. I think hers is really big. Why is it so big? So we'll do it like that for this center mark. I mean, I'm gonna make boning channels and like attach boning on these sides too, just to help stop it from moving. Yeah, that's good. I like it. Top edge is fine. We've now got a mark for the bottom edge, so I can take out the boning, cut that, and then input all the boning and finish all the edges. So then I took out all the boning, I folded it in half, pinned it, and cut along my new bottom edge, just past it for the seam allowance. And then I also pinned together the center front and cut out the diamond shape. Then I actually went through and put in all the boning, making sure that it was about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch shorter than the sewing line on the bottom. We did do a quick stitching line all along the top to hold it all together and also stop the boning from going out of the pockets. And this meant that the boning had 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch to shift as it's being worn so that it doesn't go out of the boning channel. I used twill tape to put tiny boning channels all around the diamond shape, and I just sewed down in kind of a U shape around the boning channel, inputted my little bit of zip tie, and then closed it off. The trick with these zip ties is also to curve the bottom edge so it's not flat and there's no sharp corners. I did give myself some extra boning channels at the bottom at the center front because the actual center was too small to add boning down. I put 2 on either side in a V shape from the other boning channel all the way to the center at the bottom. Then I stitched all along the bottom, closing off all of my boning channels. So I then attached my fashion layer, which was the oilsick fabric, to my structural layer. To do this, I pinned it at all of the seams and started at the waist, then worked up, then worked down. Now I did end up folding the back panel back so that I would have like an overlap over the grommets so you wouldn't see them. And then I actually went through and hand tacked all of those waist pieces down. I will warn you that all of my top layer shifted because there's stretch in that and not in what was underneath. Now it didn't make too much of a difference, everything still fit the way I wanted to, but if I was going back and redoing this, I would probably interface the oil slick so that it didn't shift and it held the same lines. I also at the end went through and hand tacked around that diamond so that it would not shift, and then I tried it on. All right, I'm overall happy with it. I have to anchor it top and bottom. It's got a little bit of a weird, like, too much fabric down here, but there is white that kind of goes around here, so we can fake it a bit. I've got my triangle here. You can see my belt through it, or my pants through it, but that's fine. There's a slight issue of it like, well, that's open, so we'll tack that on the day. Then it was time to figure out all the white designs that go on top. So using mock-up fabric that I had, I placed it on top of the corset and just looked at my references and just kept going. I, tightened it up with a ruler afterwards to make sure that it was equidistant and it wasn't getting wider or thinner or anything, and pinned it on. Once I knew I liked it, it was time for the next step. Then I traced my designs onto some interfacing, making sure that I had left and rights for all the pieces. I also did the center square, or diamond I should say, to make sure that I could do that as well. And I cut 2 of those so that I could use one as a facing in behind. Then I attached the interfacing to my fabric, and then I actually went through and cut it all out with extra space. I sewed the center of the diamonds together, and then I went through and trimmed everything and pressed the heck out of it. And I folded under my seam allowance for all of the white bits and pressed all of them. This was extremely time consuming, but it was the only way to hand sew them and attach them down. And I then pinned everything to the corset to make sure that it was laying where I wanted it to lay, except for the center diamond part. I knew that I wanted to attach that at the very end, and so I pinned everything, tried to make it as symmetrical as possible, and it was ready for hand sewing. Then I just went through and hand sewed all of the white down. Now, I did this by just picking up a tiny bit of the fold of the white and then a tiny bit of my fashion fabric underneath and just kept going all the way through, doing one side and then the other. It was extremely time consuming. I just put some stuff on my phone to watch as I did it and went for it. This was easily the most time consuming part of the whole thing. And that's saying something. But it meant that there was no visible stitching when I was done, so, you know. The way the center diamond worked is because I had stitched the middle and then flipped it right side out. There was actually a ton of excess on the back side that I could like pull taut and make it look really nice. The front side looked like all the other white where it had the part folded under and that was hand stitched earlier. But the underneath part I did with a lot more seam allowance so that I could pull it taut. After that, I actually added on top 2 layers of a flesh tone tulle fabric. And this just makes sure that when I put on the corset and I'm squishing myself into it, my tummy stays flat against the inside of the corset and it doesn't kind of try and push itself out of this tiny hole. It makes a big difference visually and it's not that noticeable, and it just makes me feel a lot better about it. And then we were on the home stretch, so I had cut out 2 strips for the top and 2 strips for the bottom of the white material, and I just sewed them in the center together and then sewed them down to my actual corset, right side to right side, so that I could flip it around and put the binding on. Then I folded it over and hand stitched it down all the way across the top and then all the way across the bottom. I'm making it sound really fast. It wasn't. It was quite time consuming, but I was just chilling out to some music. And the very final step was adding a quick privacy panel at the back, and I just made a pocket, folded over some of the black material, and then I pushed it past the grommets and hand sewed it in to make sure that you could still lace up the grommets, but once they were laced up, you wouldn't see the flesh of my back. You would only see the black. All in all, I'm very happy with this. Hers technically has more of a point, but I like to be able to actually bend in half so I can move and pose. And also on the day, the top will be a tiny bit tighter. I can't tighten the top by myself behind me. Weird. I'm really happy with it. Next week will be the skirts. So I have the red, I have the white, but just to give an idea, it'll look something like that. All right, see you next week.